Hello and welcome to the Broadrun Podcast, episode number 17. We're here with our first ever guest, Mr. Ed Armitage. Welcome, Ed.
Blair, how are you? Good to be on. 17, it's impressive.
Yeah, 17, yeah. So it's been a pretty quick start, and then that's only been in the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks that we sort of been kicked off. Multi-million views, endorsements. We've got athletic screens. We've got you name it. So obviously, first of all, shout out to our sponsors. No, we don't have any.
Soon come.
Soon come, yeah. But yeah, good to have you on, mate. Obviously, the reason that you're jumping on is you've jumped on programming.
I have. I should really be calling you coach now, really.
Yeah.
Decided for May next year, 2025, to attempt and complete my first marathon. It's
Nice.
something which you and I have had lots of conversations about, whether it's something which is entirely possible, which your answer has always been yes.
Yeah.
And it's now sort of putting the money where the mouth is, and found a good cause and thought we'd go for it.
And the cause is?
So the cause is, it's back in my hometown of Leeds. It's the Rob Burrow MND Marathon. So for those of you that don't know, Rob Burrow was a hero of mine growing up for Leeds Rhinos and the Great Britain Rugby League and England Rugby League, and very sadly passed away last year after contracting MND. When he was diagnosed with MND, he was given a matter of months to live and managed to battle it out for a few years and rose huge awareness alongside Doddy Weir, alongside Stephen Darby, who's a footballer who contracted MND as well. And I think we've all followed Kevin Sinfield and other rugby league legends' exploits over the last few years. And, sadly, Rob passed away, and, my brother and I decided that we thought that one of the best ways to honour him would be running the marathon that he himself and Kevin completed last year.
Yeah, such a good cause, and obviously something a bit close to your heart as well, being like former rugby player. And then as well, it's so good for the MND research. Like obviously myself being former rugby player too. Like there's this link that they're studying at the minute between the sort of the people in the contact sports, and why there's such a big link between people developing, like the prevalence of people developing MND is so high. So obviously the better. The quicker they get a cure, the better,
Yeah, exactly. And all the money from the charities and from sort of the raising, raising awareness will go all towards the Rob Burrow MND clinic in Leeds, which is the first of its kind in Britain, which will be able to support people with MND, and not just them. It's supporting the families as well with technology such as pre-recording, people's voices for when they lose the ability to speak, so that they still have a personability about them, even though they're suffering with an awful illness.
It's so good. And the question on everyone's mind then is, obviously Kevin did it last year, is are you going to beat Kevin's time from last year?
Which one? His first one or his seventh one? That was
no. Any of them.
Well, I think we've talked about this before, and he averages sort of 330s or sub 330s. And to be honest, when my brother, he's run a couple before, and his current PB is 346. So I think anything under that is what we're looking for, which is still a tall order, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, but definitely manageable, and especially I think probably from my perspective, you're going about marathon preparation in the correct way, in the way that you're approaching it. It's like start early and start with a sustainable build that you're able to sort of manage. We're not professional sports people. We love sports and we probably do it every day, and ideally we'd love to be paid to do it. But you've got to manage it in a way that there's going to be. The marathon journey is as big as the race day itself. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be like ups and downs and roller coasters, and the sort of longer you can make that build, the better to get to a sort of sustainable place. And pace, I guess. But I guess you're approaching it the right way. Obviously, with that being in May, with the nice weather coming now. Obviously, you're also a Dubai resident, so.
Yeah, absolutely. looking like, I wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves enough time to prepare rather than cram something. I've crammed prep for a half marathon before, and sort of it really bit me quite hard, from not preparing. And anything, I've done the odd sort of triathlons, and obviously, as we talked about, my background from the age of 5 onwards was always rugby and team sports and anything sort of short, sharp. And then, although the camera may be alluding to something different, but I actually, being sort of 5'9" and a bit, and 90 kilos, it's not exactly what you would maybe call the build for someone who's going to run marathons. And something we discussed going into the training was that I still wanted to continue, weight training, continue, taking part in CrossFit competitions and things like that. And, to be able to sort of train alongside the marathon and make it manageable and sustainable was one of the key things that, we discussed, and something that we want to make sure that we continue to do.
Yeah, 100%. And like very similar to the sort of video that I did this morning, perhaps, where it's like the one that you sort of stick to is the one that you enjoy. If you want to keep doing those things that you enjoy, the CrossFits and the lifting, like, you're able to do that in a sustainable practice, whereas in a cram loaded environment, you're probably going to have to start thinking about reducing that, because you've effectively only got so much output that you can do, towards that sort of top end of stuff. But obviously, if you build yourself up, you just been able to do more and more and more. So it's like definitely the right way to do it. And obviously, like you mentioned, your brother's on board as well. So that's like super exciting. It's a bit of like brother rivalry for me as a coach to like put one against the other. So it's a bit exciting.
Yeah. I mean, we've been pitted against each other, for the best part of 30 years. So, why not, chuck another little bit of spice, a bit of spice in the mix. I think we've already been messaging, like we started this week. And obviously a bit of messaging back and forth saying, what session are you doing? What session am I doing? And a bit of differences at the moment, but I'm sure come sort of as we get closer to the event, there'll be some longer stuff, put in, and a bit more time on the feet. But no, really excited, and obviously, to be one of your disciples is obviously, practice what we preach.
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously, just touching on it, like you've been essentially my assistant coach since the inception of Broadrun. Run endurance coaching. So it's not like you're coming from a place, you're like, we laughed about it in messages this week, but you're like a sort of your own demise is in your own hands. Like when you're helping program like interval sessions and stuff, like you're obviously doing every second week. So I mean, it's like you're in charge of your own destruction, really.
Yeah, which is good. I enjoy that aspect of it. I think it's something that you've put in yourself. I mean, you've known for so long how you've been programming your own programs and other people. It's like, if you have that self-input, you're kind of putting yourself in that position, and you're then the person to pull yourself out of it. I think that's something which I'd look forward to. And I know we've got something pretty interesting lined up for next Hill session, which
that's true, yeah.
But yeah, no, like it's nice to have a small hand in the programming, and to be able to like have access to you and like just to message you saying, how would that go? Yeah, it was awful. Let's move it around, or let's try something different. Or that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like that is good to have you there. Like, to be honest, for me as a support mechanism, like, because as a one-man band, it can be pretty it's not tough or not lonely, but it's just like good to have somebody to chat to about it. Like, because you can get lost in your own thoughts and like talk yourself into being like, is that too much? Whatever. Like, it's just like having a sounding board almost. You should be paid, really, but we'll get to that.
When these big sponsors come on, then we can talk about salaries.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like I said at the top of the show, we don't have any sponsors yet, but hopefully soon. I think what I seen some stat the other day. I don't know if this was someone, like, people just go on podcasts, don't they, and just absolute riff nonsense. So like this could be nonsense because I heard it on our nonsense podcast, but apparently 99% of podcasts don't make it over 19 episodes. So like this is obviously number 17. Like we're almost in the 1%. We're almost like elite.
Almost did it. And it's one of those, I think it's good to have a podcast where you're actually talking to people rather than these things that you see on Instagram and different social media where it's someone just talking, you feel like they feel like they're having a conversation with someone, but it's not. It's just them on their own, sort of spouting spouting nonsense.
Don't watch any of the other episodes then.
No,
literally.
No, you know what I mean, like where they're pretending to talk to people.
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
yeah. But those things are like the worst. Where it's like, fair enough if it is just you. Like, I mean, for the other ones, it has just been me talking to myself. But there's ones where like people pretend that it's a conversation. I know what you mean. Like, it's just absolutely spouting off nonsense. But it's like obviously been a good start to the training plan. Like I've just was looking up there. Like you're like obviously coming not from like a dead start, which is obviously really good. Like we're already sort of into like the second week of or the first week of program really, and you're already like looking to sort of get around that 30k mark, which is like obviously pretty good for like an impressive starting number, plus your other strength stuff, which is like really good. And I think I sort of mention it a bit on social media, and I mentioned to other people I've coached that like the best place you can go into a marathon is when you're like in that comfortable, sustainable mileage where you're sort of getting to the point where, like, I like to call it like sort of sweet spot mileage, where you like get to a point where you're comfortable, but you're still doing enough that it's enough for the marathon, but you're not pushing so hard. So obviously that's in this like first phase, is getting to that stage.
Yeah.
And then like obviously with communication with yourself, you'll be able to let me know like when is too much. That's a question, like what.
I think. Yeah, like you said, like I think it's building to that sort of distance and that time. I think, we've done intervals before, and I think something that we've progressively done in the past with our programming, certainly for the Jamira Johns on a Wednesday, is like the first interval sessions we're doing, we're looking at 3K of intervals. So, and actually we're now building up, and we're actually hitting, I think the top number we hit was nearly 9.5K in one session, which is incredible. And like for my programming, it's the time on feet, which is the absolute key thing. I think that's what really shocked me when I did the Rat Calf Marathon back in 2022. I think 22, and that really shocked me, just because I think the longest run I'd done prior to the actual event was about 12K. As soon as I hit that, I managed to get to 15K, and I was in that unknown area, and my body just didn't know how to react. And a little wobble, a little walk, a little cry, and sort of suffered through for the next 7 or 8 kilometers, which was what I think an area where going into a marathon preparation, I think getting to that sweet spot, like you mentioned, is the absolute key.
Yeah, because there's definitely a difference between two people who would come and say, right, I want to finish a marathon, I want to run a marathon.
Yeah,
like there's definitely a difference. Like we're not going to turn up on the day, and you're not going there to finish a marathon. Like you're not there just to collect a medal. Like you've got a time goal. You want to run the whole thing. I mean, not saying you might have 500 meters of walk. I mean, that sometimes happens, it's inevitable, but like you want to get to the point where you feel like strong enough that you can race your pace. And, you're not going to be at the front there with, the people who are running sort of 2:10 or whatever. But I mean, we're all running our own race, but you go out there and feel strong and feel confident, a couple of weeks before that you're stepping onto the dance floor with, what it takes. Whereas probably like you said, your half marathon, obviously I don't know about the rest of the preparation for it, but I mean, I don't think it sounds like you were. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was a social 5K on a Friday, and then slowly amp it up and kind of convince myself. But I think the problem was what I was doing as well was, and it's something which I'm way more educated on now through the likes of yourself and other different coaches that I've spoken to, is it's the variation of training. It's not just, okay, I need to just run at this pace the whole time, because I found I was just stuck in a one-dimensional pace that if I tried to even slow down that pace, my heart rate would blow up and I'd be absolutely wrecked. And then likewise, if I tried to go quicker, it'd be even worse. So having that variation. And I think the other thing which really blew my head off was running with other people in such a close proximity. Because, we're blessed in Dubai with some of the best running tracks and the weather and we're able to sort of hit, pretty consistent pacing all the way through without any obstructions. As soon as I on off that start line, and you got people absolutely flying past you, you got people stopping to walk in front of you, people are taking pictures, and it's probably only going to be worse in marathon situations. So being able to sort of vary things and be a Swiss Army knife in terms of pace, I think that's the key, really.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you're able to step on the start line and be comfortable to know what you can pull out, it's a massive game changer. Like, whereas because you're stepping into the unknown and that half marathon, do I go and sit at 5:30 kilometers or just sit at 5:45? Do you know the difference between what that feels like?
Yeah.
Am I going to bite off more? It's like, yeah, the variation in mileage is something that's super important for the marathon, and something that like I think a lot of people miss. Like if they've just been going out and it's crazy the amount of people that like they've never bothered to look into like different styles of training. It's almost like an old school mentality. Like I must do 40 miles for the week, and they don't even break it down into what that looks like. In terms of like, do I do an easy run, a recovery run? Do I do a longer run? They just go out and say, I'm going to try and hit 40 miles. That gets you so far. But eventually, you need to start applying different stimulus to your body in order to sort of get different things out of it, whether that be fast intervals to work on like VO2 max, or whether it works on like thresholds to increase your thresholds, which is one of the biggest sort of limiting factors for your marathon, is just increasing your threshold. And then obviously aerobic runs, which work in sub-threshold, and then also long runs, which is purely time on feet. There's only just like 4 different types of runs there. Like there's so much more you can do: hill runs, strength runs, paced runs. You can do, actual time trials itself. We could go on, but It's obviously good to break that down. And I think that's sort of what we're looking at really for yourself for this build. Like we'll just build up using different types of runs, but I think it's definitely going to be good.
Yeah, and I think the big thing as well is, we discussed this, we've talked about this for ages, but it's building up like a database of feel of like what that actually feels like, because there's so many times when we've just been like, let's just go full send, see how this, and then everything just feels awful. But even like you said, knowing the difference between how it would feel going from a 5 to a 5:30 to a 5:45 pace. And I kind of like getting a good gist of that, because, I think, and that's where the beauty of having a coach and having someone who you can turn around and say, this felt like this, therefore we need to dial this back.
100%. Yeah,
I'm all for, the future in AI and technology. And I know there's a whole heap of like, apps where you put in your target time, your target amount of weeks, and it also generates a training program. But where I struggle with, and call me old school, it's having the ability to give you a ring and be like, Blair, you programmed me 7K worth of, intervals or whatever. Halfway through, this is how I felt. It felt great, or it felt awful. Like having that response.
Yeah.
I just don't know how quickly you'd be able to get that feedback from, something like, the technological side of things in AI. I know Runner's an app. I know there's other ones out there, but it's that for me is where they build that database of feel, and to have that communication with you, and have that and even the other, like having my brother doing a similar program, having him saying, how did you feel on that? How were we supposed to feel against how it was? That interaction is something which I think is absolutely vital. And that's something that we see with the runners at Jumeirah Johns, and the amount of times that we see people come through and we'll say, right, you want to hit your 5K pace. They've never run a 5K in their lives, or they've never raced a 5K. So they're coming to us saying, what's that pace then? I said, well, you need to go by your feel, your RPE. And it's sort of having multiple sources of information of how you feel,
exactly.
And then being able to actually know how to diagnose it, which is like the key thing.
Yeah, I think I actually seen a really good thing the other day from one of the rival coaching groups here in Dubai. But I mean, they're speaking absolute sense, where they were like, essentially you put in the effort and then use the sort of data to sort of correlate back. Like it shouldn't be data driven and then data driven relates back to feel. It's like, do you know what I mean? It should be the other way around. Like, that should correspond with effort, and then effort correlates to pace. I quite like that way of thinking.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, I think too many people are stuck down in that, like, oh, what about this? I did this pace, like I did this, your body is not a machine. Like there's no sort of like start and stop between, right, okay, you're going to be working in this VO2 max, you're working purely anaerobic, you're working here, everything's a sort of sliding scale. So that's why it's important not to just like get too bogged down in the numbers and just sort of go sort of by feel and just keep sort of cracking on. and just like you try and break it. Like I think the old phrase, like keep it simple, stupid. Like, do you know what I mean? Don't try and make it way overcomplicated. Obviously, there's people on the top end of the spectrum, the likes of these Norwegian triathletes that are measuring every single metric possible. You know, they will not go 1 millimole over their lactate threshold, and they will not do this. But I mean, for 99.99% of people, that's just not practicable. Like, it's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know you've touched on it on a couple of posts that you've done, but this is when you've been working with slightly more elite people in running. But I'm not being funny. If someone's coming to me saying you need to be hitting this target cadence or you need to be doing that, you know, these are all the 1% details which, you know, in the grand scheme of things don't make a massive difference, especially right now where we are in terms of week 1 of the program. It's, like you said, keeping it simple. It's hitting your target mileage, hitting your paces. And even, you know, we said, you know, we did intervals yesterday and every single pace that I hit was actually quicker than what we'd originally programmed. And that will then, you know, feature, and, you know, we can then reboot that into week 2 and, you know, rejig some things. And so I think, you know, like you said, keeping it simple is the absolute paramount. You know, those thick northern lads don't really need too much information. Otherwise it'll blow our heads off.
Yeah, exactly. And you think you're thick northern. I'm even further northern, so I'm even thicker. We didn't even get schools where we are. But no, you're right. And I think that sort of plays back into, just to touch on, like accurate testing. Like, obviously we've not actually done specific tests for you, but I know, and you know now because I'm about to tell you, but like at the end of the month, we're going to be doing like another testing. So like we've only sort of gone off rough estimates of what you did before, so we'll get a chance to sort of retest and see where we're at, because ultimately that's the proof in the pudding. Do you know what I mean? You go out and do a run and you're only as sort of good as you're only as fit as your last run, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So I've got a good feeling though after obviously this week's and you know, going through that session. So we did like three sets of 400s, which obviously we had set. You know, your pace is around the 5K, and for most of them you're hitting like 340, 350. You know, had some really, really quick ones in there. So it was like, you know, around that 4 mark's really good. So we'd estimated that your current 5K was around 23 minutes, and for most of those you're hitting like anywhere between sort of 4 and 4:15. You know.
Yeah.
Some of them are obviously even quicker. Do you know what I mean? I'm just looking at it. Literally, it's on my screen, but. And you know, that's positive, right? That's like,
yeah. But as my dad would probably testify, I probably came out of quite a lot of GCSE exams thinking I felt good or felt good going into the next minute you come out and it's absolutely horrendous. But
I mean,
looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely be good. It's an exciting few weeks. Like, I'm really excited to see where we go and just like keep on building.
Plus, we've got a few tests coming up as well, or not tests as such, but I think it's worth saying in the programming, we're going to do some races as well, just to build up into it. So we've got Burj to Burj coming up, where we'd look to, you know, it's a half marathon in Dubai, and then some other races in between. I think it's good to mix it up and do a few of those races as well, just to keep that competitive itch going and not lose any boredom. Not that, you know, but you know what I mean. It's good to keep that going.
No, 100%. That's the stuff that like you sort of have little goals in the way. Like, you've definitely got redemption to have at half marathon. I think you said that you're going to look to do one of the triathlons. You know, for like, it's all just a bit of fun at the end of the day, and just going to pitch yourself against yourself. So it'll be really good. And to be honest, I'm quite excited for it.
Likewise, mate.
But I think that's sort of decent little cover of hopefully a bit of training. Hopefully we'll jump on and do another one of these like little chats just later on in the program, and you can sort of tell me in a month's time or something what you reckon.
See if I get my money's worth.
No, exactly. Yeah. Or whether I'm sacked, or whether I'm back to speaking on the podcast on my own. But thank you very much, Edward.
No, thanks for having me, Coach.
No worries. Okay, and we'll see you at the next interval session.
See you then.